Legends and leaders. I just wanted to touch base with the teachers that are in charge of this project in your schools for a little bit this morning to remind you of some documentation that will help you, document in your lesson plans the standards that are being covered. If you haven't received a copy of the standards document that Carol Mullins put together for this virtual art gallery workshop, please email me and I'll send you a copy. You can also find it on the holler.org on the virtual art gallery holler. Also, we gave you, prior to the first session, an outline of what would be happening each session. So make sure you're following that so you know how or what you need to be doing in order to have your book to a published state by the end of the 8 workshops. So those resources will all be on the virtual art gallery holler on the holler.org. If you haven't joined, both students and teachers, do so. You're all welcome, and that's just a wonderful place where you can find additional resources that not only Mr. Epling posts, but other people post, just to make your book a real success and one that could be published. So at this time, we're excited to begin with session 4 with Christopher Epling.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 4th week of the Virtual Art Gallery Workshop. I am your instructor and host for this workshop and program, Christopher Epling. It's an honor to be with you again this morning. I'm really excited about all the schools that are participating and the grades that are participating. This is the Leaders and Legends workshop, so if you're just tuning in and you haven't really looked through the last tutorials or the last sessions that are recorded and posted on the holler, it's really, you should do that. Go ahead and go back, and we're not going to review those too much. We're going to just go straight forward. But Leaders and Legends focuses just what it sounds like on either leaders or legends. And what we mean by that was covered in the first session during the overview. So be sure and take a look at that when you get a chance. We are looking for students to create works that follow a certain standard. And that standard is outlined for you and provided for you in this little form that was emailed out to everybody beforehand. Now, if you look at this form, on that is all the weeks are broken down. weeks 1 through 8, and under each week the criteria to be met is listed, and it's very clear, very plain. So those standards are what we're looking at. That's really important. Some things that we've covered already is constructing and how do you put your story together, the parts of a story, which is very important, and also finding information out. Are you going to choose a leader, an individual who's made a difference in your community or your region too? It doesn't have to be someone really well known. It doesn't have to be someone with a statue in the park downtown in the county park there. But it does have to be somebody who's made a difference, and that's a really important aspect to that. Now, legends is totally different. Legends deals more with superstitions. There is one that's very well known here in eastern Kentucky of the devil dogs that run across the hills and mountains and the landscapes of eastern Kentucky. It's a legend. I've never seen a devil dog, and I don't think anyone I've ever spoken with has ever really seen a devil dog, so it's a myth, it's a legend. But there's more than just those. The best place to start with that is to ask probably your grandparents or an elder in your community, or just ask people, what are some superstitions, some legends, some myths that you've ever heard? Stories, tons of ghost stories. A house could be haunted, a region, different things like that. Regional myths and legends is what we're looking for, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get into this week's session. This is probably the more fun of all the sessions because we're dealing with putting the pictures to your story, drawing. And before we start actually looking at the drawing, I want to be sure that you understand that we're talking about picture books, chapter books, and graphic novels. So that's the three main focuses that we have here. That's your options. You can create either picture book, chapter book, or a graphic novel. So how do you put your story? Now you should have had your story written. So let's say here's my story. I've typed it out. I've handwritten it. My teacher has looked over it. She's graded it. She's handed it back to me. And now I'm standing here and I'm holding this and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, I got to put pictures to this now. How do I do that? Last session we talked about storyboarding a little bit. Storyboarding is very important for your book, and we're going to look here today and focus on how do you pencil in pages from the storyboard. Okay? All right. For example, we're going to be going back and forth a little bit this morning, so I'm going to be talking to you for a second, then I'm going to be showing you something, and when I show you something, the camera's going to shoot overhead, so you're going to see exactly what it is I'm talking about. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is talk about the graphic novel format. Here's a great example. Now this book is about an individual from Canada. His name is Louis Riel. He's sort of like the Davy Crockett from Canada or the Daniel Boone. He did a lot of exploration into the frontier, and the creator of this comic book is Chester Brown. So on the cover we have very clear, and covers are important too. You do have to have a cover for your story. So let's take a look at this cover. So we have the character, the main character, we assume anyway, Louis Riel. He's looking up at these storm clouds coming. He's standing on the top of a rocky bluff here on a mountain. And you can tell here from just the cover that he's facing some insurmountable odds. I mean, that's what I get from the cover. We have the title clearly depicted, who it's by clearly depicted, and so this is a great cover for a graphic novel. Now when we turn inside and we start looking at the comic book or the graphic novel, you can see how the panels are placed out. They're very neat and orderly. He has followed a format, Chester Brown, the creator, to have 6 panels. Now panels are the boxes here, per page. Now I was at Middlesboro Middle School here for a couple of days last week talking to the students. And we covered something that I thought, I guess I assumed most students kind of knew already or had knowledge of already, and I was kind of shocked that they didn't. So because of that, I do want to show you a couple of things. Now in comics, I'll draw it out here on this paper. In comics, you communicate using, we all know this, which is your speech balloon, right? We have a speech balloon. So that's one form of communication in comics. The second form of communication in comics are thought balloons. So they look something like this. This is how you can figure out what's going on inside a character's mind. So the character may not be sharing what this, such as The speech balloon is open and public and out there. Thought balloon is all internal, right? Then you also, maybe I can find an example of that real fast. Here we go. See the box at the top of this panel? There's a box there with words in it. So we also have these boxes. And what these boxes do, and they can be any size, this is your narration. This is the story. The words that appear inside these boxes, the characters don't hear those words. That's the narrator of the story. So you could have something such as this. The character's talking, they're getting into an argument. This person comes out to try to solve the problem. And here in the box, we learn that the person who's solving the problem is actually on one of the other person's side, and it's a conspiracy. So the characters who's in the story don't know that it's a conspiracy, but the reader's informed that it's a conspiracy. So this is the form of communication in a graphic novel. So if you're choosing to do a graphic novel, be sure and think about these elements. How are you going to place your panels on the page is very important. This is something that should be decided upon in your storyboard. And also, how are you communicating with thought balloons and word balloons and narration boxes? Okay? All right, so let's take another example here. This is a wonderful example written by Bob Shea. This is for picture books, those interested in picture books. Bob Shea wrote Dinosaur versus the Potty. Now this is geared towards elementary grade level students. The cover is very bright, lots of color. The main character's there. Very clear, bold words letting us know what the book's title is, who the book's about, or written by at the bottom here, Bob Shea. Now, Bob Shea's a Kentucky author. He works for KET. He does a lot of work in KET. This book is actually made out, when I met Bob, he's a really nice person. So in the first panel, we have the main character. Or not panel, but page. The first page, we have the main character, very bold, bright colors, introducing himself to the reader. Bob decided that on each page he would place his word. Now look how he uses different types of what we call font. What that is just letters, different size letters, different looks to the letters. So when we have roar up here, roar is really big and bold. And then we hear the dinosaur say, I don't need to use the potty. And then he's roaring away and in little words, he's roar, 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 you know. So think about this. Think about placement of your text. And this is really what session 4 is talking about too, is placement of your text on your page. It's really about constructing these pages. So let's say you've chosen a picture book. You have your story written, and now you're going to start putting pictures to your pages. The best way to do that, and we'll take an example from Bob Shea's book here. So you should have already have, like I said, you should have had your story written out by now. So here's my story. Let's pretend it is. And I'm placing my story to the side here, and I'm going to now create a storyboard for my work. This is something you should already have completed and finished. So your storyboard works something similar to a guideline, okay? So for a children's book, for your chapter book, and picture book and graphic novel, you will have already decided what's going to go on the page before you ever start creating your work. Okay? It's very important. So you put on a piece of paper, page 1. Okay? Now, of course, you know, creating a storyboard for a graphic novel would work something different, wouldn't it? Because you're going to have all these boxes. But we're going to look at picture books first for an example here, okay? All right. So we have pages written out. So we have page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. This is of my book, okay? On a separate sheet of paper, you'll want to have your cover designed out. So here's my cover. I noticed last time a lot of students had trouble with storyboards, and I don't really know why. It's so simple. Some students really just nailed it too, because they even sent in their storyboard as examples. So I use my story. Here's my story, and we're going to pretend the book doesn't even exist at this point, okay? So I'm reading my story. Okay, on this particular page, I'm reading it, the dinosaur is going to be drinking lemonade. So I may have down at the bottom, my dinosaur here at the bottom of the page, his mouth is open, Now this is where you don't have to get really detailed with it. Little stick figures will work. It doesn't matter, just real simple little drawings to help you and decide what's going to happen. So on this particular page, let's say that the dinosaur is drinking lemonade, and at the top we're going to have a very big bold word, roar. That's what's going to take place on this particular page. And then on your other pages, as you read your story, you decide what's going to go there. So I may have on this particular page the dinosaur running. He's running as fast as he can. His eyes is here, his mouth is here, and he's running as fast as he can outside to play, okay? So, and he's roaring again, all right? So on each page you sketch out this little tiny sketch to show what's going to take place before you ever start with your story. And you do this for each and every page. So you know where your words are going to be placed. You know what's going to appear on this page. And like I said, don't overdraw this. Keep it simple. You may draw a stick figure. Here's my stick figure. My words are going to take place up at the top here. My stick figure is running for a school bus. Here's my school bus with the windows. Okay, and the bus up here. Okay, it's simple sketches for your storyboard. Because what happens is, when you're ready to start these pages, which is today, you can look at what you're going to be doing, and you can be guided by your storyboard. So let's look at the roar page with the lemonade. So let's pretend this is going to be my completed page for my book, okay? We're going to turn it landscape. Landscape means the length of your paper is moving along a horizontal line instead of a vertical line. Remember that horizontal runs this way, vertical runs this way. If you remember from geography or social studies, right? Even. Okay, so roar. This is my first page. So I see the dinosaurs here at the bottom, roars at the top. Okay, so at the bottom of my page, I'm going to sketch out my dinosaur. He's at the bottom of the page. He's got his spikes here in the back, his mouth. This is where you're supposed to take time and draw it out, because this is your finished page of your book, okay? And I'm going to draw what Bob Shea has drawn in his work to help you understand how this works, okay? All right, so the dinosaur has little claws here, his hands here, he's got another hand here, all right? And he's holding his lemonade, this big gold container of lemonades here, and he's pouring it into his mouth. So this is going to come down like this and be splashing out all over as he drinks his lemonade. Okay? See? Simple drawings. Even you don't have to be too complex in your finished work. Keep it simple if you want to. As long as it's more about your ability to tell a story with pictures. It's not about your ability to draw like Marvel or DC Comics, okay? So here's what I have, and at the top I'm going to have roar, all right? That's the word that's taking place on this page. So then I would have this and I would color. See, I'm going by my storyboard. I'm looking at the storyboard, and then I'm moving forward and I'm drawing what's on this page. So once I finish this, I color it. It looks really good. Then I would go ahead and move on to what's going to happen on the next page. So page 2, and so on and so forth. Because the finished page, which should be here, what we've just finished, after I color it and everything, it's ready to go in the book, right? All right, so I'm glad we have a little bit of an idea for that. Now let's look at chapter books for a second. Chapter books are just as important. For chapter books, you want to keep in mind that we are going to be dealing with a lot more words than what we typically would. And let's see. Well, let's look at where the sidewalk ends, okay? This is not a chapter book, but this is a book of poetry. And I want to show you how this is laid out, because it's similar to a chapter book. In a chapter book, there's tons of more words in a chapter book. And the reason I chose where the sidewalk ends as an example is that I want you to be able to place illustrations along with words in an interesting way. And where you have more words for a chapter book, you have to think about where you're going to place your illustrations a little differently. And where the sidewalk ends is a great example. Now, although this is a book of poetry, you can use this for your chapter book. For instance, we see that down at the bottom of this page, there are drawings, okay? This has a ton of more words than a picture book. Remember, we looked at the dinosaur versus the potty a minute ago. It had only a few words. Now, this is an example from a book that I just finished for Mary Powell Wagner. I illustrated this book for her. It's coming out November 14th, and it's called The Dance of the Fireflies. Now, this is a children's book. This is a picture book. When you open this book, you see that that the words on the page are very simple. They're not very many words. They're placed somewhere, but the main theme of a picture book is the drawings. The main point and focus of a children's book is the drawings. See here, this is one of the illustrations for her pages, and we have the words up here, few words, but the main focus is this big drawing, the bright drawing. Now you notice that this book opens up, and on each page there are 2 drawings. You see this? 2 pages per drawing. This is called a double spread. And you can do this with your work as well if you want. So that means that you can turn 2 pages into 1 illustration. So there's different ways to do that, because we'll be covering more examples of this next week. So let's return to the chapter book example. Like I said, this is not a chapter book. This is a book of poetry, but this gives you a great example on where you can place illustrations when you have a lot of words as well. So you could have a ton of words on 1 page for 1 chapter. Let's pretend this is chapter 1, and here's all your words, okay? At the bottom of that page, you can insert a small drawing, okay? Another way you can use illustrations with a chapter book is in the heading. What I mean by that is you could put a chapter 1 here and start your page, and a big drawing on the other page to represent what's going to happen in chapter 1, okay? You could also, if you wanted, insert drawings to the side of your words, and also we talked about at the bottom of the page. So there's tons of different ways to place illustrations in a chapter book. See here, we can see a great example. Chapter 1, we have the words here, and the drawing is over here, okay? All right. For a storyboard for a chapter book, it'll be a little bit different, and I'll go over that for a second. Because this week we are covering storyboards. For a storyboard for a chapter book, runs similar to what you would do for your picture book. You would have your story here written out. Here's your story already written out, lots of words. So when you plan your pages, you're going to have more pages than a picture book. Okay? So you would put little squares on your page, just like this. This is your storyboard. Okay? This is page 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and so on and so on and so on and so on. You keep going. I would read my story, okay? I would decide what words will be going on my first page, and let's say I introduce a little drawing at the bottom of this page. Let's say my chapter book is about dinosaurs, okay? So I'm going to put a brontosaurus at the bottom of this page. All right, over here I'm going to insert maybe a pterodactyl at the top of this page. Okay, here's my little pterodactyl flying. And just pencil, like I said, stick figures, small sketches. So I could have a little tiny drawing at the top of the page and all the words appearing at the bottom. Now let's say I want to do something interesting for the next chapter. Let's pretend that these 2 pages make up chapter 1. And these 2 pages make up chapter 2. Of course, there usually are more pages per chapter, but that's okay. This is a good, just for example here. So let's say I want to do something interesting for the start of chapter 2. What I could do is draw a giant drawing over here on the side. Let's say I'm going to draw a T-Rex over here. He's standing, and his tail's back here, his little arms. And then up here is chapter 2, and then the start. So you could have a illustration making up an entire page before the start of your next chapter. There's tons of ways to do this. Tons of ways to think about how you're going to construct your book. Let's go ahead and use an example from a graphic novel real fast. Let's talk about the storyboard for that. We'll use Lewis Reel because we have it handy nearby. We've already used it as an example. Again, we think about our cover for each one of these examples. We have to plan that cover out, okay? So let's say we're planning the cover. Let's say we've written this book on Lewis Reel, okay? So I'm planning the cover. I'm going to draw stick figure again, okay, remember? He's standing here looking up at the storm clouds. He's on a rock. Up here are all the storm clouds coming in, okay? And we have another mountain in the background. It's going to be all dark. This will be all dark. Right here in the middle is where I'm going to put my title, and I'm going to put all the information about what the book is. So I have Lewis Reel and my name. So I've planned out the cover. I have the cover ready. And this helps guide you too, because when you set it aside and you start actually drawing out that cover, you know exactly how to design it, right? It's already there for you. All right, so let's look inside a book. How do you plan for a storyboard for a graphic novel for the interior book? Let's go ahead and look. He has structured 6 panels per page. That's a great way to do it. You could use 4 panels. You could do 12. You don't even have to set your pages up like he has the panels one after the other, and it's very uniform. Each page is the same look to it. You don't have to do that. You can design a page differently. So when you're creating a storyboard for a graphic novel, you're going to have to use bigger boxes for your storyboard. So this is going to be page 1, here's page 2, here's page 3, and here's page 4, okay? And then once I have the boxes for my storyboard, or for my pages, I'll write page 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So now this is my storyboard. Let's pretend we don't have anything over here yet. I'm just have this book out as an example. And you have your story written, and you're going to go by your story and decide what's going to take place on this first page, okay? Let's say we've read our story, and now we're deciding what's going to happen. So I may have a box here, a box here. I may have a very long box here. So your panels can be organized in different shapes, different sizes, and you can place them in different ways on your page. So let's say this is what I want for page 1. Okay, I'm following my story, I'm reading my story. Now I start putting little thumbnails in there. Here's a word balloon for the character. The second panel, the antagonist or the villain is here now, and he's talking to the person. In terms of leaders and legends, this is more for legends, but also for leaders as well. Leaders often overcome obstacles, so you'll always have an antagonist and a conflict in your story, even for the leaders. Okay, so you want to maybe put a narration box in some of these so that you're telling the story carries on and so on. So planning for a graphic novel runs similar to planning for a picture book and a chapter book. It's just that there's more pages in a graphic novel, and you have more boxes, okay? All right. So now that we've covered a little bit about storyboarding, we also want to be sure and talk about how you're going to lay your book out for your pages, where you're going to place things on your page, okay? And it's very important to think about that, because if you just jump into it and you're planning your storyboard and you have no idea what you're going to do with each page, at the end you're going to be very disappointed on what's going to take place. So draw each page complete with pictures is one of our categories for today, and we want to make sure that we know how the words are going to appear on your book. And remember, you got to create that storyboard. So in this book here, written by Yuri Shulvitz, Writing with Pictures, he talks a little bit about this, exactly what I'm trying to cover right now. He talks a little bit about how to design your pages. There's things to think about, such as how are you going to orientate your book. And what I mean by that, you can have, your book can be just about any size you want, okay? And what we're going to do, every student that participates will have a bound copy of their book, okay? What I mean by bound, I'm not talking about with staples or spirals. I'm talking about a professionally bound book with the glue binding, a perfect bind as we call it in the industry. And then there'll be some students, though, a handful chosen to go on to become published authors. They will receive published copies of their book to sell, and they'll work with the UPike and Moorhead University to create a business plan for their selling their books and a business model. So this is a great opportunity for you. Now I've drawn some boxes here on this page, and what these boxes represent are the shapes of your books, okay? Over here we have examples of that as well. So for the first one, this is called portrait. And I want you to learn these words: portrait, orientation, straight up and down. So that means this paper is portrait. It's up and down. It's more long going up and down than it is wide, okay? That's what I mean by that. All right, the second is landscape. What landscape means, and we covered this a little bit earlier, your paper is running this way, okay, from side to side. It's more long from side to side than it is from up as it is tall, okay? You can shape your book in different ways. Think about this. This is true for a graphic novel, picture book, or chapter book. Now, typically a chapter book is portrait. Typically a children's book is landscape. And typically a graphic novel is portrait. But that doesn't mean you have to do it that way, okay? So you be deciding how you're going to orientate your book. What's the shape of your book? Now, during the last art gallery workshop, we had some students to create little tiny books that were landscape. So you can go all the way down to 8.5 by 5.5 for your book. So that's pretty small, okay? All right, great stuff. Now, I guess now we can move on to drawing. We want to be sure and cover that a little bit for those of you who maybe have an art class or some don't have an art class. Want to make sure that we cover a little bit of drawing. I want to talk about this for a second. It's important that everybody understands that when I say drawing, I'm not talking about your ability to draw like Marvel Comics or DC Comics or Pixar. It's not about your ability to draw something that's really detailed and technical. I want you just to be able to show pictures with words and tell a story. Your story is so important in this. For Leaders and Legends, the focus of that, it's more about structuring the story than it is about your drawing, okay? So be sure and keep that in mind as we move forward. We're going into the drawing aspect of the workshop now. This is the most fun aspect, so it's very important that you consider this as we move forward. Now what I have here is a book called Pictures and Words. And what this book is, this is a collection of all of the new artists that are coming out in the industry. So basically, if you're an artist and your work is in this book, then you are working professionally creating the characters that you've come up with. Now you would think now, based on that, that there's some pretty detailed and technical stuff in here, right? But there's also some very simple stuff that you wouldn't probably imagine, such as this little taco here. And we can put that on the overhead so you can see it. This little taco is very simple. You wouldn't imagine this to be a villain in Batman. You wouldn't imagine this to appear in a maybe a Pixar movie, maybe so, but I'm talking about the detail and shape. It's very simple. It's basically an upside down letter D, and let's draw that for a second. It's basically this shape here, upside down letter D, right? Okay. It has two little points for eyes, a little circle for a mouth. Its arms maybe be the most complex thing, but not really. Its legs come down and it just forms a little loop. And then its hands, again for this side. So there we go. We've created this little taco that was not over complex. It wasn't something that maybe was too, technical to draw. Everyone could handle the taco here, right? But you may say, okay, Mr. Epling, that's one example of that book, but I bet there's tons more in here that are very complex. That's not true. I'll show you. I'll prove it to you. All right, for instance, one example are these talking heads. Now look at this artist, what they've done. They have little circles. They've put a little bit of hair on them. The eyeballs are even blacked out. The mouth, it's not that detailed. The speech balloon, and look here, they've even marked out a word. It looks pretty basic, and even it also looks that if the artist didn't take time to even polish his work up or her work up very well. Okay, so this person is earning a living creating these characters here that you see. Okay, we all can handle this. All right, we all can draw a circle, not even a straight circle. Put hair on it. Eyes, nose, mouth. We all can handle this, okay? It's not about your ability to draw like Marvel Comics. Now, there are some very complex stuff in here. I'll admit, there are. Some very complex stuff that you wouldn't probably want to try to tackle because it would probably take you all year to create it. But then also, there's stuff like this, right? Where you have, looks like someone spilled a bottle of ink and drew hands on it, isn't it? Okay, so keep that in mind as we move forward. There's artists that are being published out there that do not technically draw like Marvel or DC Comics. Now, let's say you like to draw, but you're not confident in your ability. There's books available. So before we start drawing today, there's books available. This is more of a complex book. This one deals with anatomy and the bone structure. So, there's books to help you understand, though, how do you draw a face, okay? How do you draw a face? Now, this is really complex stuff here, but how do you draw an eye, right? So, there's books available out there for students. In your library, even, you may find books such as this, How to Draw Superheroes and How to Draw Supervillains. Now, in books like this, it's going to use a method that we call the Marvel method. Almost always. And what the Marvel method is, if you look really close here, you can see that in the first step, now some students that I've talked to when I visit schools tell me that they go to YouTube a lot and they'll search for like how to draw a minion, how to draw SpongeBob, stuff like that. And when they bring up that information, almost every single one of those videos starts out using the Marvel method. That's where we draw these basic shapes. See how the artist he's drawn a circle, he's drawn an oval, he's moved it back into these shapes here, a triangle. Up here we have a couple of ovals to create the structure to build upon. This is what I want you to do in your work. So when you're completing your finished pages, use this type of method where you're drawing these shapes, then you add to it more and more in order to get to the final product, okay, or the final piece down here at the bottom. So this is the method that we're going to be following, and we're going to be doing that right now. So if you're able to, you can grab a piece of paper and follow along with me. As you can tell, I'm not using any fancy pencils. This is a basic number 2 pencil available to you. That's what you're going to be using too, and you don't need anything fancy to create characters and stuff. And what we're going to be drawing today, we're going to draw a minion. And I'm going to show you the basic structure of a minion and how to draw it. So when you first start out with your character, you're going to draw these simple shapes first. Now notice I'm not pressing down very hard. I'm barely pressing down on my paper here, right? And I do that for a reason. I'm going to draw on top of this shape, and then I'm going to go back later and erase parts that I don't use, okay? So when you're structuring your page and you're designing your characters for your story, you want to keep this in mind to use, you're going to go back and erase. So use these shapes and erase. Now designing your character is a big part of your story. How is your characters going to look? You've written your story is finished, you're done with your story, you're ready to start drawing. How does your characters look? So in order for
for you to decide that, you have to play around and sketch it out some and try different things. Now, I highly recommend, just like when you plan for your storyboard, you draw your storyboard out, I highly recommend that you plan just the same for the look of your characters. Okay? So I really highly suggest that you draw your characters on a separate piece of paper. Draw every character that's going to appear in your story so that you know what they look like before you ever start drawing your final page. Okay? So what you should have a storyboard completed to help guide you with your story, and you also should have your characters drawn on a separate piece of paper to show you what your characters are going to look like in your story. So if you have those two things starting out, you're going to be successful. You're going to be on the road to becoming a published author, okay? So for the minion, you can see that I've drawn a circle, and then I've drawn what looks almost like a marshmallow shape, right? With these two basic elements, I can construct the entire feature for the, or body for the minion, okay? Now I'm just adding more details on top of my framework. I am going to put all the details in, and then I'm going to erase, okay? So keep that in mind as you're moving forward. It's very important to use the Marvel method in constructing your characters. You'll have a lot more success in that, all right? So for the minion now, we're going to finish off the little minion's body here. Erasing is a big part of this. No artist, no matter how long they've been drawing, is going to draw something perfect the first time, right? Erasing is a big part. Now when you're designing your characters, I want you to think about a couple of things. Now there are going to be different guidelines really for drawing, like a leader or a legend. Let's say you've picked a certain leader for your work, and you're researching a little bit now about that leader, why they're important, what they did was important. Okay, so you have something to go by already, a person, a living being that was around, and maybe they're still alive. So you're going to have to draw that person in your story, and we're going to cover that in a second, drawing people. First, I just wanted to show you, in case for the legends, when you create a character, I wanted to show you the Marvel method in doing that. So for his feet, I'm using ovals and a circle here, and then I just add on top of that, and it should come out right. Let's see what happens. Oval here, shading it in a little bit. All right, so the minion's coming to life now. Now, let's say you've chose to create a story on a person, on a leader. You know what the person looks like, and you're going to have to draw that for your story. Don't get overwhelmed by that. It does not have to be perfect, your drawings, okay? And I want you to be confident that you can do this. You can. As long as you draw pictures along with your words, you've met the criteria of the workshop, okay? So it doesn't have to be perfect. So there's a minion. You can go back and add shading and really make it stand out. We don't have much time for the workshop, so I'm going to move on just a little bit and talk about drawing people as we move on. So they've used the Marvel method now to create this minion, right? You could follow along with me later on theholler.org. If you want to visit there, you can watch today's episode again, and you can get to this point of the recording, and you can draw the minion with me step by step as I went along, okay? Drawing people. Now, this is where students really get nervous, and I already know that students are going to be selecting more legend options than they are leaders. I understand that. But we are going to be selecting for publication later equal number of books that are leaders focused and legends focused. So there'll be about half leaders and half legends. So let's say 90% of students create the option for legends, and only 10% create options or the option for leaders. The ones who create the leaders are going to have a better chance of being published than the legends. So keep that in mind. Okay, drawing people. This is where everybody gets nervous. I want you to keep it simple, very, very simple. And in this book here, if I can zoom to the portion of the head, it can get very overwhelming, all right? And some artists will study even structures of the head even. They'll go and they'll look at how how a human head is created, how it is formed and everything, and they'll study these complex books in order to make something look very, very realistic. I don't want you to focus on that so much. You can do a cartoon version of your leader, and that will work just as fine. So for the purpose of this, we're going to draw a person. I always start with a circle, always, because this will form the top portion of the cranium of the head, and we can see from books that are available to you that this is a way that all the artists start out with their characters. You can see there's a circle here for the head, and let's get another good example. Here we go. A circle for the head here, and you're going to notice that the artist has drawn these, looks like crosshairs or an X in the middle of the face, and I'll show you why we do that here in a second, okay? All right, so here's another really good example. So this artist first draws out a circle or an oval here, and then they begin to put lines on their character to help guide them. So this is what I'm going to do. Now first, I don't start out with an oval, I start out with a circle, and then I may draw these two lines coming down to form the chin, okay? So let's say here's the chin, all right? So I draw these two lines coming down from my circle. Then I'm going to draw this straight line coming down the middle of the head. Always do this. Now in this particular version, the person is looking straight ahead, okay? So if you were to draw someone looking to the side, that would be a little different, wouldn't it? The X would come down like this instead of straight up and down, right? And then the jaw would be like this instead of like we have it up here, all right? So first we're focusing on a person looking straight ahead. So then you put an X. Now what this line does is it shows you where the eyes are going to take place, all right? This is where the eyes will be formed here on their drawing. All right, with these elements that I've just drawn, I can form a head. It doesn't have to be realistic. I'm going to draw a little ear here. I'm going to draw an ear here. Okay, the nose will be about right here, right? The eyebrow will be about here and here. Let's go ahead and draw an eye on them. There's the eye, and this will be a little bit more animated for manga style, I guess, than anything. So here's the eyeball. Okay, draw the eyeball in there. There's the mouth, and then the hair can be, this is more of a manga style, right? I'm sure you're not going to find a leader that kind of looks like this, but this does help you to understand how to construct the human head. Okay, see? All right, there we go. It's a human head formed by a circle with lines coming down. Let's do it again. Let's do it from a different angle this time. I'll keep this to the side so you can still see it. Let's say that you're drawing something on a character. He's a person, he was a businessman, maybe a business owner or something. So here I drew a circle first. The chin is on this side, the line comes down the front of the head. So instead of over here where the line is straight across, or straight, I mean, this has got a curve to it, right? Because the person is looking in this direction, where this person was looking straight ahead, okay? So the ear would be here. You wouldn't see the other ear on this particular one. The mouth would be here, the nose would be here, the eyes would be about right here, right? Eyebrows, and you draw the hair. So you have to look at the person that you've written your story about, and you have to draw them for your story. You have to tell their story in pictures, okay? And it's true for the myth as well. So to get good at that, use this method that I've showed you today. And see, you're going to have to erase. You're going to have to always erase. Erasing is a good thing. Okay? So there I've drawn a person's head looking in this direction. But don't overcomplicate it. You can just use a simple cartoon type look to your work. That's fine. Circles for a nose, mouth, hair, and so on. Okay? So I guess our business person would have a tie on and have a dress jacket. Right? See how that works? So, all right. What we're going to do is we're going to be creating a tutorial for drawing in this session that will go into this in more detail. What I will do is I'll bring in a, let's say Abraham Lincoln, or a picture or maybe Hillary Clinton. We're going to be drawing the actual person in the tutorial, okay? So show you, and we'll do different styles. We'll do a realistic version, and we'll do a more cartoon, and then we'll do a complete simple version where it's just circles and dots for eyes to help you see that it's not about the ability to draw like I said, Marvel or DC Comics. It's more about your ability to tell a story using pictures and words. And we'll work on getting that tutorial out as soon as possible for you so that you have that as a resource, okay? So I think that we've covered just about everything that we need to for this week. What you should be doing for next week is planning and your storyboard. You should have your storyboard finished, done, going into week 5. It's so important that you do that. You're going to be penciling your page. You're going to be continuing to develop your pages, your finished pages for your book. And we'll have a tutorial also for week number 5, and it's how to sequence your art to tell a story. Okay? I want you to not get overwhelmed with the workshop. This should be a fun experience. It was for the students in the first virtual art gallery workshop. Go to the holler. I cannot stress this. This is so important. This is so important. If you're going to go, let's say, build a home, you don't just walk up to a lot, right, with a bunch of boards and say, okay, I'm ready to build the home. It takes planning. You have to know, well, where am I going to build the house, number 1. Number 2, what is the home going to look like? How many rooms? Where's the doors? Where's the windows? All that and so on and so forth, right? So it's the same thing with constructing this for your story. You start out with writing a story. Then you go from looking at those words and deciding, how am I going to turn these words into pictures? And how am I going to place what words I need onto the book pages? That is the main focus right now that you should be worried about, okay? And then you should be starting to work on penciling those finished pages using that information, your blueprints. And your blueprints, like we said, is your storyboard and your design for your characters. You have to know what the characters look like before you ever start drawing on a finished page, okay? But go to the holler. There's resources there for you. I've already posted a few resources as we went along. Other teachers have posted resources. Go there, theholler.org. That's the website, theholler.org. If you haven't registered, do that. Take real simple, put a name, create a username, you're done, password, and you're done. But then find the Art Gallery Workshop. Behind me here is actually the holler right here, and right here is the Art Gallery Workshop right there. So this is the website already, it's pulled up for us. If you were to click on this, the Art Gallery Workshop, it would take you into all the resources for our project here, okay? So equip yourself with what the tools that you need to become successful, and equip yourself with the information you need to become a published author, okay? So good luck. I hope you're having fun. Look for that tutorial. It's going to be on theholler.org. We'd like to thank theholler.org also for producing such great content for us in working to produce our tutorials and episodes and sessions. Okay, thank you so much for your time, and good luck on your drawing, and I'll see you next time.